Imagine a millionaire surrounded by luxury, power, and absolute control. Now, imagine this man having his life turned upside down when he discovers that he has impregnated a homeless woman. It seems impossible, doesn't it? But the turnaround is just beginning. Clara, with her wit and strength, doesn't want his money. She wants dignity and a future for the baby. And Leonardo, used to solving everything with a check, realizes that he is facing a challenge that not all the money in the world can buy. Will they be able to turn an unlikely situation into something extraordinary? Or will the ghosts of their differences tear them apart forever? Stay tuned, because this story of unlikely encounters and unexpected changes will challenge everything you believe about love, redemption, and second chances. The loud music from the gala event seemed to pound Leonardo's mind as he walked away from the crowd of guests. The hall was full of mixed voices, each trying to sound more important than the other. He no longer had the patience for endless debates about investments and partnerships. His argument with one of the partners still echoed in his mind. I needed air. Crossing the main entrance, he left the event without informing anyone. His tie was loose, and he carried his jacket over his shoulder as he walked through the quiet streets of the city. He felt ridiculously out of place. It was rare to be outside of his planned and controlled world. After a few blocks, his steps slowed. An alley caught his attention, not because it was inviting, but because a figure sitting near a shopping cart, overflowing with junk, seemed to be watching him. A woman, wrapped in layers of worn-out clothes, looked straight at him. "Hey, handsome, did you lose your way to paradise?" she teased, smiling defiantly as if she already knew his answer. Leonardo frowned. "I just was walking. Do you always approach strangers like that?" "Only when they look like depressed millionaires," Clara replied, adjusting her threadbare scarf around her neck. "Let me guess. You got into a fight with someone important and now you're trying to prove a point." Leonardo took a step back, surprised. "How do you know that?" Clara laughed. "Ah, darling, I've seen everything in this life, and you scream, rich man with existential problems." Leonardo hesitated but ended up smiling. Something about her intrigued him. Maybe it was the way she spoke, without fear, as if she didn't care about impressing him. "Right, I had a fight with someone, but that's none of your business," he admitted. "Of course it isn't," Clara replied, making space on the floor next to her. "But if you want to vent, this alley therapist accepts payment in food." Leonardo looked around, as if checking if anyone was watching, but ended up sitting on the floor, something he would never have imagined doing. They talked for long minutes, which turned into hours. He was surprised to find himself laughing, something he hadn't done since the pressure at work began to suffocate him. "So tell me, what brought you here? Do you think a walk through the dark side of the city will solve your problems?" Clara asked, raising an eyebrow. "Maybe I just need a different perspective," he replied thoughtfully. Clara told about her life, without going into deep details. She mentioned a financial accident that led her to the streets and how she learned to deal with it. But Leonardo realized there was more than she was willing to reveal. In return, he confessed that the night's discussion had been about a contract that could determine the company's future. "So, contract tycoon, have you decided who wins the fight?" Clara teased with a playful smile. "Not exactly," said Leonardo. "But this conversation was enlightening." When the sun began to rise over the horizon, Leonardo stood up, adjusting his jacket. "Thank you for listening to me. It was refreshing." Clara shrugged with a casual smile. "You're welcome. Come back when you need more free therapy, and next time bring coffee." Leonardo laughed as he walked away, feeling different, lighter. He didn't know that this meeting, so simple and unexpected, would change his life in ways he couldn't even imagine. Leonardo stared at the envelope on his desk. It was discreet, with no brands or logos, but the contents had left his mind reeling. Inside was a handwritten letter, something rare these days. Clara said she was pregnant, and he, without a doubt, was the father. "This is absurd," he muttered, rubbing his temples. "She might just be trying to take advantage." On the same day, Leonardo went to the address that Clara had left. It was a shelter for homeless people. He stopped the car and hesitantly got in. The environment was simple, with plastic chairs and people walking around. There was Clara, sitting by a window, with a small plate of food in front of her. "Ah, if it isn't the lost tycoon," she said, smiling as he approached. "Can we talk?" he asked directly. Clara got up, taking the plate with her, and led him to a more private corner. "Let me guess, you think I'm lying?" "You read my mind," replied Leonardo, crossing his arms. Clara gave a dry laugh. "Listen, I knew you wouldn't believe it, but I thought you had a right to know." "And how can I be sure it's mine?" he asked, his tone cold. "Ah, of course, because I meet millionaires every day," she replied, raising an eyebrow. "Relax, Leonardo. I don't want anything from you. I just want this baby to have a better chance than I did." Leonardo frowned, surprised by her frankness. "Then why tell me? Why not just get on with your life? Because despite everything, you deserve to know, and because maybe, just maybe, you can help without putting the check before the human," Clara replied, looking at him without looking away. He remained silent, his head full of questions. Then, on impulse, he suggested, "What if I offered you money to resolve this discreetly?" Clara laughed, but this time there was something bitter in her tone. "Money solves everything in your world, doesn't it? Unfortunately not mine. What I want is priceless, a chance to do things right." Leonardo didn't know what to answer. For the first time, he felt that he was faced with something that his financial power could not simply fix. When Clara walked away, he stood still, unable to leave. In her mind, she was not just a vulnerable woman. She was an enigma that he was beginning to realize he needed to unravel. Leonardo couldn't get Clara out of his head. He spent hours rereading the letter, trying to find something that would convince him she wasn't lying. But for some reason, something about her seemed genuine, too much to ignore. He decided to investigate. "I want you to find out everything about her," he told his assistant, handing over the name and address of the shelter. "I want to know if she is being honest or if this is a scam." 2 days later, Leonardo received the report. Clara was a former literature teacher who lost everything after her husband's sudden death and a series of debts that forced her to sell her house. The report also indicated that she refused to accept easy financial help, preferring to rely on community shelters. He didn't know why, but the information hit him in a way he hadn't expected. He thought it would be easier if Clara was just someone trying to take advantage of him. But she seemed to be different. That afternoon, Leonardo returned to the shelter, this time with a plan. He found Clara in the same place, reading an old book with a worn cover. "You're back," she said, without looking up from her book. "We need to talk," he replied. Clara closed the book slowly and looked at him. "Okay, let's talk." Leonardo sat in front of him. "I went looking for information about you. I know what happened to your life." "Good for you. Do you want a trophy?" Clara replied, crossing her arms. "No, I want to help," he said, surprising even himself with the sincerity in his voice. Clara looked at him with a mixture of suspicion and curiosity. "Help how? With another check?" "No," he replied. "I want to make sure you and the baby have everything you need. I want you to get out of here. Not just for the baby, but for you too." "And what do you get out of this?" Clara asked, leaning forward. Leonardo hesitated before answering. "Maybe I'm trying to fix something inside of me." Clara was silent for a moment, analyzing him. Then, with a smirk, he said, "Okay, millionaire, let's see if you know how to help someone without trying to control them." Leonardo laughed softly. "Challenge accepted." Clara's new routine started the next morning. Leonardo took her to a support home that he had personally chosen, ensuring that she would have the necessary support during her pregnancy. The place was welcoming, with tidy rooms and dedicated staff. "So this is where you plan to park me?" Clara said, crossing her arms as she looked around. "It's not a parking lot," Leonardo replied, trying not to laugh. "It's a fresh start." Clara narrowed her eyes. "Do you really believe in this fresh start thing, or is this just a rich man's motivational speech?" Leonardo sighed. "I'm trying, okay? Can you give me a credit, please?" Clara shook her head, but couldn't help but smile slightly. "All good, but only because the room has a comfortable bed." As the days went by, Leonardo visited Clara regularly. They began to create a routine, talking about the most diverse subjects. To his surprise, Clara made him laugh, something rare in his life, full of formalities and negotiations. "So, have you always been this bossy?" she asked during one of the dinners they shared at the group home. "Bossy? I prefer the term assertive," he replied with a smile. "Oh, of course, that sounds a lot less unbearable," joked Clara, laughing. As much as the coexistence was becoming lighter, Leonardo began to feel pressure from the outside world. Friends and counselors questioned his decision to help Clara. "Leonardo, you are compromising your reputation for something that doesn't make sense," said Ricardo, his longtime friend, during a meeting. "My reputation doesn't matter to me as much as you think," Leonardo replied dryly. "And her? Are you sure she won't end up harming you?" Ricardo insisted. Leonardo didn't answer, but the question remained in his mind. The climax came during a charity event that Leonardo decided to take Clara to. Dressed simply but elegantly, she caught the attention of the guests. However, some whispers began to circulate, and soon Clara noticed the judgmental looks. "So it's true," said a woman approaching Leonardo. "You brought her." Before Leonardo could respond, Clara intervened. "She has a name, you know. Or do you only talk to people who wear ties?" Clara's tone attracted attention, but also caused discomfort. Later that night, she confronted Leonardo. "I don't need this, Leonardo," she said, clearly shaken. "I don't want to be a burden or a charity project." "You are not a burden, Clara," he replied, "and I don't want you to leave." Clara hesitated, but there was something in his sincerity that made her reconsider. "Then prove it, because I won't be a burden on your conscience." The days after the event were tense. Clara remained reserved, responding to Leonardo's visits with short, polite but distant sentences. He knew he had made a mistake. More than that, he realized that his actions were motivated by a desire for control, something that Clara would not tolerate. For the first time in years, he found himself vulnerable, not knowing how to fix a situation. That morning, Leonardo went to the support house, determined to do things differently. He found Clara in the garden, sitting on a bench under the shade of a tree, with a book on her lap. She saw him approaching and sighed. "I hope you have a good reason for being here." "I have. We need to talk," he began, trying not to sound authoritarian. Clara closed the book slowly and crossed her arms. "If this is another attempt to solve everything with a magical solution, I'm not interested." "That's not it," said Leonardo, sitting down next to her. He looked at the ground for a moment before continuing. "I just wanted to apologize. For everything." Clara raised an eyebrow in surprise. "This is new. You usually arrive with a plan or a check." Leonardo let out a short, nervous laugh. "I know, I think that's what I did to keep everything under control. But I realize that with you, that doesn't work." "And what works then?" she asked, softly, but with a touch of skepticism. "Honesty, perhaps. Or at least that's what I'm trying now," he replied, finally meeting her eyes. "I made mistakes many times, Clara. I tried to control a situation that didn't need control, but care. And I want to be part of that, not just for the baby, but because I care about you." His words took her by surprise. Clara remained silent, letting him continue. "You made me realize that my entire life was built around avoiding mistakes, avoiding the unpredictable. But with you, nothing is predictable, and I don't want to lose that. I don't want to be a burden in your life, Leonardo. I've been through this before, and I won't take it again," she replied, her voice firm but vulnerable. "You are not a burden. You're the only real thing that's happened to me in years," he said, with a sincerity that disarmed her. Clara looked at him for a few moments before letting out a sigh. "Are you willing to prove this, Leonardo? Because I will not accept empty promises." "I am," he replied without hesitation. Months later, Clara gave birth to a healthy girl in a private hospital, with Leonardo by her side throughout the process. He held her hand while the nurses tended to the baby. "She's perfect," Clara whispered, looking at her daughter. "Just like her mother," replied Leonardo with a soft smile. The birth marked a new beginning for both of them. In the following months, Clara and Leonardo dedicated themselves to something bigger, creating an organization to support women in vulnerable situations. The initiative quickly gained momentum, attracting support from influential people and bringing visibility to the cause. At the organization's inauguration, Clara took the stage alongside Leonardo, with her daughter on her lap. In front of the crowd, she held the microphone tightly. "If someone had told me that an unlikely encounter could change my life, I wouldn't have believed them. But today I'm here as proof that even in the most difficult times there is hope, and that, with support and courage, we can create a better future." Leonardo watched her, proud. After the applause, he came closer and whispered, "Do you realize how much you changed my life?" Clara smiled, adjusting the baby in her arms. "You learned to deal with the unexpected. I think this is a big change." As they watched the guests celebrating, Leonardo held her hand. Together, Clara, Leonardo, and their daughter knew that they were just at the beginning of a new journey. It wasn't the perfect ending, but it was the right beginning. And that was all that mattered.